Labadiena! In this video I'm gonna be making one more epoxy lamp. But not just any kind of epoxy lamp, this one's very special. You see, when I released this lamp collection, my brothers reached out to me and asked to save one lamp for them. But I wanted to make something special and extraordinary. So I asked them if they have anything in particular what they would like to put in the casting, and they replied me that Icelandic lava would be nice, so that's what I've done. And honestly, I'm so in love with this piece. I think I could easily call this one my best epoxy lamp so far. Well, anyway, enough talking, and let's jump into the build. I'm starting the process by spraying some mold release into the old mold I had left from when I was making the epoxy lamp collection. And once the mold was prepared, I started looking for the lava my brothers asked, and I knew I had the full box of Icelandic lava somewhere. I just had to find it. And this lava came directly from the island when I was flying back and forth working as a contractor. Well, anyway, first of all, I've tried to break the lava because it was too big to fit into the mold, but I noticed that those breaks don't look too good. They look just too fresh and artificial, if you will. So I decided to cut two perpendicular sides and place the rock into the corner of the mold. So once I will have the casting, those sides would look as sections of the rock and the rest of the rock would be intact. But of course my cuts weren't perfect, and I had quite a bit of extra sanding to do. And this busted white weld sander belt came in really handy. I used it as a sanding surface and made those sides flush and exactly perpendicular to each other. The next riddle to solve was securing the rock in the mold, and my approach was fairly simple. I just prepared a square piece of plywood exactly the size as the bottom of the mold, and used some CA glue and glued the lava piece onto that plywood square. And I've tried to stay as true as possible when I was gluing it onto the piece. And now it was just a matter of placing my contraption in place, and then I shot a couple of brad nails through the bottom into that plywood square. At this point everything was prepared for the epoxy, and I've started mixing the components together. I've added a bit of a teal pigment to bring some color into the mixture, but I made a crucial mistake here because I was mixing in this giant vessel, and I've introduced a lot of air this way, and I should have used the gassing chamber instead of pouring the epoxy right away, because as you will see, most of the tiny bubbles were trapped inside the casting and nothing was really visible after I took the mold apart. I've learned the lesson the hard way, but you know the saying, cut the losses and move on. So here's what I'm doing. I'm preparing a new piece of rock. I place it into the mold just as before. I decast the epoxy this time and fill the form. Unfortunately, I had a tiny leak in the bottom of the mold, so the level of the epoxy dropped a bit, but this worked out in the end. Once I had a cured block of epoxy, I moved to the sander and removed any wax residue left from the mold release and basically squared the piece up a bit. I needed square sides because I had to have a firm grip while removing that plywood bottom I stuck earlier. Obviously this saw left some marks, so I had to sand any kind of deep scratches and saw marks. I also took my time and rounded over the edges so the casting would fit into the silicone mold easier. I'm gluing a very thin section of the square tubing on the bottom of the casting, so I would have something to grip onto using magnets. It will come clear in a moment. Here you can see the technique in action. The problem was that the casting ended up being a bit oversized, so I had to thin down 2 of these sides, but then it worked like a charm. Next I prepped some deep pore epoxy. I degassed it so no air bubbles would be trapped in the resin, and filled the form. I made the silicone form myself, so I wouldn't have to polish the casting every single time, so once it's out of the form, it's basically done. All I have to do is send all the overflow from the bottom, and the casting is as good as it gets. Now I had to choose the right base for the casting, and I had quite an assortment left from the first time I made the lamps, so choosing one was no problem, and I chose to go with alder. The only problem I'm having here is the transition. It doesn't really look too well because I've upgraded the silicone mold, creating the smoother transition towards the bottom of the casting, and these bases are from the first design, if you will. So here you can see me smoothing the edges a bit and making that transition look a bit better. And these bases were already finished with lacquer, so since I removed some material from the sides, I had to reapply the varnish once more. And the base is basically finished. All what's left to do is put in the electric components, which is nothing more than connecting a couple of wires. As you have noticed, I've developed quite a good process of making these lamps. I really enjoy doing that, so I will definitely make more of these in the future with some interesting stuff embedded in the casting. Sincerely thank you for watching, and I really hope to see you on the next video. Bye bye!